Welcome to the Cellar. It's been a strange week. Good strange, surreal strange. But I'll talk about that later. Right now, we're going to plunge into the comments as soon as I lubricate my lips. All right into it. I'm 67 now. The idea of driving half a day to a convention, living in a hotel and schlepping around the hall for 2 days somehow seems less appealing than it did when I was 18. Not sure why. Couldn't possibly be age-related, I'm sure. You're right. It is. All of the above. And from a dear friend, posted, if I'd known it was going to be the last Gary Con, I would have worked harder to get there to see you in action one more time. Well, dear friend, we'll always be dear friends. You've seen me in action many, many times, and I've not changed radically. I don't wear a pink tutu, and I haven't taken to carrying a wand with a sparkly star on the tip yet. It may happen, but not yet. Thank you for clarifying a question I had for more than 25 years. Good answer. That must have been the one about the Caskim and the Constitution and Gamma World. I'm guessing. All right, we'll go to a different area. Literally. On helmets and abstract combat. A rule I use to encourage wearing helmets without getting into hit location nonsense is to have critical hits only happen to PCs who don't wear one. I don't usually bother with crits, but simply maximizing damage on natural ones, I use a roll low system, is just enough of an encouragement without slowing the game down. I guess if you're into that, I can certainly see where that would be a good incentive to wear a dome without a doubt. Let's see. I'm thinking. This made me think of something else again. I think I addressed it later. Sorry, didn't mean to be rude. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. If you want to get into crits, okay, then it would be a head crit every time. Makes sense to me. Yeah. All right. Agree with magic items being rare. Savage Worlds, Fantasy, and many other tamp down on the mountains of magic. In a sci-fi setting, I make sure only the basic laser pistols, armor, and vac suits and ship weapons are available. Otherwise, you had better find contacts to purchase them from, especially in high law-level worlds. Yeah, and we're going to address availability of magic, and there's another question later on, or another comment later on. If you put when I made up my very first dungeon, went home, went back to Carbondale to my wife and my daughter, and read the books and followed the books as well as I was able. I had too many things in there, not only too many monsters in too many rooms, but I also had too much magic. I just did what the church said. Okay, and I hadn't read the part about yet very well about these are guidelines, not rules. So yeah, I had a magic heavy beginning to my first campaign, and it worked itself out in mostly gruesome detail, but I wish I hadn't done it that way because it took a while to work it out. Just because it's on a table doesn't mean you got to put it in your dungeon. The charts and tables are more for idea thinking, and certainly not immutable amounts or anything like that. And trying to find somewhere you can buy these kinds of things should be quite difficult. I now use your advice and give more single-use or very limited-use magic items. That has helped keep magical inventory low and forces some tough decisions on PCs. Potions are alchemical, so easier to find but more limited in power. A magic sword, that is a royal heirloom or mythical item which drives the PCs to gather information through studying mystical tomes to find possible places those magical items have been rumored to be. It has helped avoid some of that magical boredom. Thanks for the advice many years ago. Well, many years ago must have been on Dragon's Foot, huh? Many years ago, that's where it would have been. All right. Nice Dark Tower is a fantastic basic adventure, probably the best one of which no one has ever heard. It was in the UK basic set. I don't remember it getting circulated in the US at all. I'm told that it is now called B10. It is available on Drive-Thru-RPG as a download and is worth adding to your collection. For what it's worth, the players arrive at a somewhat disorganized goblin siege is going on, but the players basically run a very quick scout mission and respond to a couple of threats that break the palisade. It isn't truly a siege or mass combat scenario. Again, it is a wonderful old-school module which, like the Keep in the Borderlands, could go on for a year or more depending upon how the players respond. Isn't it one of the hardest things as a designer and a writer, I find, is trying to put a decent amount of playability into something, and how much is a decent amount, and that's the thing we all wrestle with. I would like to think that the first two Gary Kahn adventures, as they're now published, should be good for anywhere from 6 to 10 sessions. It could be less. Again, don't know. Depends on the level of the party. Depends on the bloodthirstiness of the DM. But I try to figure averages and figure, okay, it'll take them this many hours, or this many sessions equals how many hours. And I try to shoot at that. But that's real hard to hit, I know. But besides, as anybody who's develop their own adventures can tell you, after spending hours and hours and hours and hours, the party takes 3 turns that manage to miss all your carefully crafted stuff and stumble right into where they were looking for. It happens. Okay. All right, topic. The effect of dank conditions on food or supplies. Well, before we even go in here, I always advocate for real-world common sense applications. And in fantasy, we can choose to ignore that which we don't care to deal with or don't want to be bothered with, or not. If PCs are spending too long in one spot, is it okay for the DM to pull a few tricks like pointing out that the conditions that the areas are malingering and is starting to rot their food supply? Certainly. Everybody scratched one day's provisions. You've been here so long the food went bad. Certainly it is. Absolutely it is. And if you want to run a hyper-realistic campaign, you should. All depends on how far toward hyper-realism you wish to go. Question 2. Random wandering monster tables are a great go-to for getting things back on track. But if the party gets into a spiral of investigating beyond the need to do so, gets attacked by a wandering monster, moves to a new location, investigates too long, gets attacked by another wandering monster, rinse, repeat. Is it legit to start using other tactics? Like maybe, well, now you've re-inspected the same list floorboard so many times your boot goes through it and is now irretrievably stuck there, you must go singly booted, minus 25% to movement. Well, I'd almost say that seems a little harsh, but then again, if you've got a player that is going to persistently just stomp, stomp, stomp like a Cossack dancer, then I don't consider that necessarily too very capricious. When you want to move the party on, use humor. Nobody will get too sore if you do something, say something, get a rise that gets gets a laugh, and then when everybody's chuckling, okay, back now. All right, where were we? I find that a laugh will break tension, will break up incipient bad moods amongst the party in convention groups that don't know each other prior to sitting down at the table. Humor never hurts. Wandering monsters, well, if you want to really have fun with a wandering monster, and you want to have it like as your ace up your sleeve, have a wandering monster that tracks. Oh hell, here comes that so-and-so again. That's such a whatever. Again. He's back on your trail. And that'll keep him moving, or it'll make him stop and fight it out. This time for good. Is it better to just break the fourth wall, as it were, and request that the players ease up on whatever repetitive action is slowing the game down? Yeah. And again, you can use humor. On the fourth time that the thief's gone, or the rogue, or whatever you call it's gone, has said, okay, I'm checking, and I'll say, okay, yep, absolutely. The mortar's a little faulty over here. It's a really neat set of bricks they got over, and I will take it to the silly degree. Again, seeking to keep the party and the table having fun. But that's just the way I do it. Your mileage may vary. Breaking the fourth wall every once in a while, I think is healthy. I really do. All right, now here we have an interesting ethics question. Should using the rules of a tabletop RPG to benefit your character or the party be a part of gameplay? Or should players just concentrate on role-playing? All right. Are you saying that I should sanction the most vile, despicable, sleazy type of role player there is in my pantheon? The rules lawyer? Now, if the rules say that it's such and such, if the rules state or heavily suggest that at a certain level this particular class can do this kind of thing, and it's kind of glossed over or just thrown as an aside, well, certainly exploit it. If it's in there, exploit it. And if the DM doesn't want to use it, he'll tell you. And it's his privilege to be able to do that. If you're going to try to, it's in so many of these questions, it sounds so terribly adversarial. Like we're going to lever every crack and seam we can find in this game to beat the DM. And it's not about beating the DM. And poking a knife blade in every conceivable crack to try and wedge something, what's the point? Nobody wins. You're not out to beat anything. There are no winners. There's no brass ring in role-playing. Okay, now here we go about the wealth or lack of magic. I've never had more magic items than in 1E. Even in your Wheel of Blame game, I have more magic items than any 5E characters I played. If you look at 1E modules and 5E adventures, there are way more magic items in 5E. 5E has more magical powers than 1E has for abilities, but magic items, not even close to the amount. Well, here again, we're going with, if it's in the module, I have to use it. And here, again, if your players have been reading the module on the side, and they get to the room where they know it's going to be the jackpot payoff, and it isn't the jackpot payoff because you've moved it somewhere else, diminished it, whatever, what are they going to do? No, it's your adventure, your world. Oh, hello, Liam. My cat Liam has come by to say hello. Or wander around my feet. Yes, there were magic items available in 1E, but we never, ever said you have to give them all out. When you see a table or a chart with 25 different things on it, it's not saying, we weren't saying, here, eventually these 25 things are all going to be in your world. We were giving novice DMs some, here, if you don't have a lot of ideas, here's 25 possible ideas that maybe you didn't have 20 of before. Didn't mean give them everything. Now, in the Wheel of Blame, my game, it's not 1E. It's not O. It's the Wheel of Blame. It's an amalgam of the two that I run at conventions. And yeah, I give you magical stuff because 3/4 of the time you never get to use it. Its purpose never comes into play. But it looks good on the sheet. Okay? I don't care if you've got a magic lockpick that picks locks by itself if there's not any locks to be picked. So, it's what you choose to put in. The books aren't recipes. All right, in response, I believe, to this, thinking about this, you're probably correct. Comparing, say, Fandelver to any of the B modules, the game has changed a great deal too, though, with most 5e characters having magic. I think only 3 of the classes have none, and probably several classes within the group having healing. I just don't lace as many potions of healings and other magic in the adventures when homebrewing. Characters also have a +4 proficiency, so the +1 swords aren't nearly as necessary or even enticing. No one wants to go on a long quest for a +1 sword anymore. By the way, I agree with the newer to hit math, though. It's just not interesting to roll misses 3 out of 4 times for a 3rd level fighter rolling to hit a kobold or a goblin, for example. That might necessitate some HP expansion, but in my opinion, 5e has gone way too far. Combat shouldn't take 45 to 90 minutes. Well, if you think 5e has gone too far, they have scaled back. I believe it was probably 4, though the details of the individuals are getting blurry. I believe it was 4 where they came out with something that was like playing a pinball machine or a computer game, turn-based, type game, and it could take 2 hours to resolve a single encounter. So, they're trying, but it's still way too long. Much too long. Okay, and someone else goes on. I agree. All right, a further response to the first one. I agree with the PCs being magicified. Oh, there's a new word, so to speak. There isn't much space for magic items. I think the last campaigns in 5e, we reached level 11 and had a total of 2 magic items the entire campaign, which was the norm. In 1e, magic items were there like candy. Yeah, they could be. Yes, you're right. You're right. But again, the overriding ethic in 1e is they're not written in stone, they're guidelines. If you don't want that much magic, I learned on my first iteration, put in way too much, well, not only too much, but a couple of things that were just way too powerful for a bunch of people that really were still learning how to play the game. And so when we rebooted, a lot of those things quit working. But it was okay because they were higher levels then. Anyway, okay. Again, you didn't have to put it in. You didn't, I know that by today, by any standards, I always thought Gary's amounts of treasures were way too high. But that's the way he ran his. Of course, you brought all that loot back into town, and inflation took off, and you were soon parted from your shekels. Okay, now this is one of the more bizarre questions. I was wondering what your weekends were like when you worked for TSR. Okay. When I was at TSR, I was married, and I had an infant, or young daughter. She was 2, a little over 2.5 when I went there. And my wife was a nurse and worked every other weekend. So I had 2 types of weekends. Both of them involved taking care of our daughter, obviously. Feeding, dressing, bathing, all those mundane child-rearing things. And when she was asleep or otherwise occupied, I might go in and bang out a half an hour or 45 minutes, or edit. I might edit a few pieces. If my wife was off, we did things together, the 3 of us as a family. if she was working, I took care. Now, I had, occasions when she was off to have a couple, 3 people over to play games, or I had occasions to drive over to Lake Geneva to do playtest sessions a few times. But I was really a commuter in that I left work at 12:30, 1:30, somewhere in between there, drove home so my wife could have our one car to drive to work. Gotta remember, we were paying ourselves at TSR the princely sum of $100 a week. As time went on and schedules shifted and whatever, some weekends I'd have Tramp over and we'd play games and race cars all weekend. Tramp was kind of like a member of the family, and he was always welcome to supper and things like that. So my daughter remembers him quite well, and she was quite little. But he was a big, tall, imposing, whiskery, red-headed dude. That's really, what people not making lots of money that can afford to go take trips. That's what they did on weekends. We were not far from Milwaukee, not far from Janesville, not that far from Rockford. So if there was something we had to do or something we had to get that we couldn't get anywhere else, but that was it. And pretty mundane, really. Now, I started this off tonight saying it's been a somewhat surreal beginning of the week. And I'm referring, of course, to the RPGs and the Humanities Symposium that I was asked to be a part of on Monday and Tuesday, this past Monday and Tuesday at the University of Cincinnati. Had no idea what was expected of me, except that I'd been given some topics for panel discussions. Which panels would I be interested in sitting in? So I marked off a couple of them, say, yeah, I'd like to talk about this, talk about that. So I got there bright and early on Monday morning, and a very disparate group of people. I don't know, there might have been, 25 altogether. And they were from colleges and universities all over, mostly over the East. But we had somebody from Utah and somebody from Texas, and we had a very charming gentleman from Spain. And it's not often that I feel overwhelmed by the company I'm keeping. It's not often I feel like the dumbest guy in the room. But I was the only person there to address role-playing in history from a high school point of view. There was 50, there was at least probably a dozen PhDs sitting around the table. And it wasn't like they were all snotty, just a couple of them. And some of them, we had some quite interesting discussions. But we had to introduce ourselves when the first session begins, and the guy that put it together pointed at me and said, "Go first," because where I was sitting, unfortunately for me. So I introduced myself, and as this was after he welcomed everybody. We're here to talk about yada 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 yada. So, hi, my name's Tim Kask, and I started role-playing Dungeons & Dragons in 1974. And there was an audible gasp. And we went around and all these different people with differing slants and approaches, from pure game theory to integrating episodes and experiences in the classroom. And I found it quite interesting. And the first day, I participated in a couple of sessions, and then lunch came, and it was nothing I cared to eat. And then there was another short. Anyway, I was out of there probably at 2. Maybe not even that. Like 1:45, and I was done for the day. Okay, so I went home, and I'd been scheduled to play in a space science fiction punk thing, Cody Pondsmith, and I begged off, and I talked to Cody. I said, it's not you or anything. I said it's sci-fi, and I don't know sci-fi role play from shit, and I'd probably get the party killed in the first 20 minutes. So I talked to the guy that put it all together. He said, yeah, that's cool. Well, there's other people who'd be glad to get the slot. So I said, okay, what about tomorrow? And he goes, well, the day that I was supposed to do the game in the evening, why don't you just come at 11 o'clock and we'll talk. There was a talk about something else. And then I want you to run a game. Okay. So in the meantime, I'd gotten an opportunity to speak with a guy about possibly looking into the possible development of a teaching aid I developed a couple of decades ago, but it's more practical now. And I got there, and he said, okay, and he put me in this nice little side room with a long lozenge-shaped table and nice chairs with wheels and cushions and stuff, and I ran a game for 4 people, 3 PhDs and the adjunct professor from UC who slipped him my name to begin with. And it was April Fool's Day. And I said, okay, you want to have it brutal or do you want to have fun? And they said, okay, let's have fun. Well, it was a motley crew, and we played for a little over 2 hours, and then we had to quit because there was something else coming up. And so I was told, that's it, thanks, man, oh, really appreciate it. So for a 2-hour and 15-minute game that I ran that day, I got, if you divide up my honorarium, I got more money than I'll probably ever be paid for running a game again. I was delighted. The school's delighted. I'm on the short list for expert now in this kind of stuff when they needed somebody for another one of these things. And all I got to say is, it was weird, it was fun, it was strange, and I really enjoyed it. Art, the humanities, and role-playing, and there's lots of ways to do it. There's a game where you can have 50 people in a class in the 1968 Democratic Convention. You divide them up into protesters and delegates. Wow, wouldn't that be fun? There's a couple others that sounded like, wow, those are big, and they're big. Who the hell runs a role-playing game for a party of 50? Yeah, I'll run the football team. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. So I hope you're having a lot of fun. Right now we're dodging horrible, scary weather. I might be flooded, and my basement may be flooded by the time you get to watch this on Saturday. So far we've been lucky, so keeping our fingers crossed. And with that, I'll say Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.